Welcome to the museum at FIT's Fashion Culture Series. My name is Tania Melendez, and I am Senior Curator of Education and Public Programs. Tonight, we're honored to welcome the supermodel and designer, Liya Kebede, and MFIT Assistant Curator of Costume, Elizabeth Way. They will talk about lemlem, Kebede's collection of women's, men's, and children's clothing made entirely in Africa. The core collection is hand-woven from natural cotton in Ethiopia. And women artisans are at the heart of this brand, which is committed to connecting these communities to jobs, education, and maternal health programs through the Lemlem Foundation. This talk is organized in conjunction with our exhibition, Fabric in Fashion. And at the end of the talk, Liya and Liz will answer questions from the audience. We have handed out cards where you can write your questions during the conversation, and we will collect them nearing the end. Please join me in welcoming Liya Kebede and Liz Way.
Hello. Hi. First of all,
Hi.
Thank you, Liya, so much for coming to be here with us tonight. I'm very, very excited to have you here and talk about lemlem. It's very, very, it's such a special company, and we're very happy to have you here to talk about it. And thank you all for joining us tonight. So we're going to get started, and I want to talk a little bit about the role of Ethiopian textiles for you personally. So thinking about growing up, what kind of memories, early memories do you have of kind of traditional textiles and what kind of role they played in your life?
I mean, definitely growing up, we all had traditional dresses. My mom, she had like many of them, and everybody almost has like at least 3, 4, beautiful dresses made by an artisan weaver. And you usually wear it for weddings or going to church or any kind of special occasions. That's usually what when you'd wear a traditional dress. For me, I have a special memory with our traditional clothing because in high school, I started modeling when I was in high school, and it was in Ethiopia. And we started modeling with the 2 women designers that existed at the time in Ethiopia, because usually we don't really have designers. It's just you go to the market and you look at it, you go to this artisan and he might have a few dresses, or you could ask him, oh, can you make me a dress like this? And he makes you take it. That's how it's done. But then when I was in high school, there was a few women who were kind of interesting and sort of forward-thinking who decided that they wanted to create this kind of design idea and hiring artisans and then sort of drawing more of a modern dress that then you can wear for weddings, so you're looking a bit more cool. And I started modeling at the time with one of this wonderful women who was doing fashion shows with these, she had gone to fashion school in Italy and had come back, and so she was drawing these very interesting new shapes and made by traditional weavers. And so when I graduated from high school, I commissioned one of she was really wonderful enough to gift me and make me a special dress that was all handmade by the artisans, but it was like very body conscious and beautiful, and I had like the most amazing dress. And so I've always had, I guess, a sort of special attachment to that, and a nice memory of it.
That sounds really, so ahead of its time.
Yes.
So we talked a little bit about how everyone had some traditional pieces that they wore for special occasions, but did you find, kind of in your own experience, you grew up in the capital, in a very urban setting, were traditional textiles more prevalent in kind of the countryside, or was it, everyone kind of had, their everyday clothes and then their more special clothes, whether you're in the city or the country?
It's definitely something that's everywhere, actually, whether it's in the city or in the country. Of course, when you walk around in the countryside more, people wear it more daily. So it's more their daily outfit versus the city where everybody's wearing workwear or jeans, t-shirts, and things like that. But yet everyone always does have in their closet a few traditional outfits because you need it for a wedding, you need it for this, you need it for that, or Easter or whatever it is. And so it's quite it was very prevalent, obviously. And also you pass through the market and there's like all these, weavers sitting and selling their things. So it's very common. And also it's quite identifiable mostly in Ethiopia. They use local cotton, and they spin the cotton by hand before they weave it. And so it's all natural cotton, so then most of the clothing, the base of it is kind of this natural white color. And so when you see a lot of people walking around, you see a lot of this white dress and this white outfit and, white, gorgeous, like, headdresses and things like that. But then you'd have like a gorgeous border that is either really, gold or color, or all those things come in as like borders and trims and things like this. So that was very much the traditional. And also sometimes when it's like, the church is a big part of Ethiopia and spirituality is a big part of our culture. And so almost every day is some sort of a saint day somehow. And you'd pass by church and everybody would be in this white outfit and the women are all covered in this white, sort of shawl and everything. And so it's quite beautiful.
It sounds like you get this amazing sense of occasion and like this beautiful kind of background that sounds absolutely gorgeous. And you touched a little bit about this, but if you could say a little bit more, so you think about spinning and the weaving and the dyeing. Were these kind of visible industries? You talk about buying in the marketplace, but did school children growing up, everyday people, were they very aware of these industries and had knew a lot of people who worked in them, or was it something that was like today for us in this country, these are invisible industries. We don't really know anyone who spins or weaves or dyes. Was it different for you growing up?
Yes, because they're not really, I guess you wouldn't really call them industry. It's not a factory where there's people, you see them everywhere, or even at home, like, sometimes your grandmothers will sit and just spin cotton. And so it's kind of in your life a bit. And they're also in the marketplace. So you see the weaver, he'll be sitting with his loom, weaving on the side and things like this. So it's quite there, it's quite visible, actually.
That's great. So it seems a lot like it's more kind of based in the community. So I would imagine that people just in general know more about textiles and the way they're made and where they come from.
They know it's woven and things like that, but where they come from and everything is going to be different depending on each ethnic group would have a different. So that's not obvious. People have a general idea because you'll say, oh, I want the dress from this ethnic group today, or you do that. So women mostly are aware to some degree, but not extensively.
And I find that kind of in the research for my exhibition that in the past people really knew a lot about textiles and how they were made and what they're made of. And today we're less aware as things kind of as the process gets streamlined. Yeah. So could you tell us a little bit about lemlem and how you founded it? I know this is a really beautiful story, so if any of you guys haven't heard it, I'm sure you'd love to hear about it. So lemlem started from a trip. I went back home to visit my family, and one of the places that I visited, my parents are from the capital city, and so one of the places that we visited when I was back was actually the marketplace, and where all these weavers were, and there was a lot of push from the country and the government to really push the artisans and push this industry and push manufacturing. And so there was, everyone was asking, like, what can you do? What can you do? What can you do about it? And so I went to visit this area with all the weavers and saw that A, there was a lot of them. And also B, that most of them were not selling their clothes anymore, or at least enough of their clothes to survive. Because most people were wearing less and less of that and wearing more Western clothing, and so they, on top of it, so usually weavers will, they sort of work by piece. So they'll do one piece, sell that piece, and then go home and things. So there's no consistency. There's no like
work, ethics and things like that, and nothing secure. And so I never really had any desire to start a brand or anything. It wasn't even in my head at all. It was just really looking at this and saying, okay, what can I do, given my position, given the opportunity that I have being in fashion and having access to all these different people, all these different media, what can I do to solve this problem, basically? So it's more of a problem-solving type of situation, and saying, how can we, because really the art of weaving is beautiful, and the people who know how to make it, the less they make it, the more you will lose that art. And so I wanted to help preserve the art of weaving, and at the same time, also, I've been working a lot in philanthropy, and I know the problems of aid and sustainable aid, of always needing to raise money to find and give money to people. But for me, I think the best way to help people is to enable them and to give them jobs and make them independent, so that they can break the cycle of poverty and help their families and send their kids to school and be employed and have a skill. And so that's basically the basis on how Lemlem was founded about 12, 13 years ago.
So, can you talk a little bit about the design process each season? Do you develop the fabrics first or the silhouettes first, or just a little bit about that process?
So we design everything here in New York, and then they make everything there. But firstly, we always start with the fabric, because the fabric has to be woven. And so how we started is, first we've definitely evolved a lot by working with our artisans and working collaboratively with them, and working out the limitations and the kinks and all of that, and it takes a while. And so our vision was, let's keep the traditional way of making this, but then we have to give it a spin of some kind, so that a woman in New York could wear it and it's seamless here, or anywhere in the world you want to be. So the idea was how do we look at colors differently, maybe look at shapes differently, and we look at the techniques that they know how to do and use them in the colors that we want and the ways that we want. So we first start with the fabric, and it's the hardest process, but we have a great team. And so we get swatches. Sometimes we get swatches. Sometimes you don't really know. You kind of, you sort of imagine it, and then it goes, and then when it comes back, it's like, wow, amazing and incredible. And so once we have sort of the fabrics in our heads and the colors set up, that's when we start getting into shapes, and then bodies and all of that stuff.
Cool. And you started with Childrenswear, which is so nice.
Yeah.
And it's great that you can start with this smaller market and then expand. It's a very it's a really smart kind of business model. So you were talking about giving it, talking about colors and designs and putting a spin on traditional Ethiopian designs. How do you recreate those to appeal to an international market? Do you have kind of a formula, or is it like season by season, this idea evolves each time?
I think it usually evolves. It's around things that I love, things that I see, things that inspire me, shapes that I really like, I feel comfortable in, and then all the colors and all these things. But I think that at the beginning, we were thinking more about, we had to first look at what are the capabilities and what are the limitations of what we have. So, for example, the fabric, it's because it's hand woven, it has no stretch. So then you have to work around that. So we said, okay, everything has to be sort of loose, so that has to be the style. And then we look at what are cool things that are loose that we can wear. And then because of also the weight of the fabric, and we have this very airy fabric, we gravitated towards thinking about resort wear, and something that you wear. Like, I'm wearing one of them, obviously, but how do you wear that? But then also, how do you wear it in the city? How do you make it cool enough to make it to wear in the city? And so you kind of go in and out. So I lost my train of thought.
Talking about international markets, but it's great that that you really let the fabric guide you.
Yes, you sort of have to. I think when you work in something like this, you have to go almost backwards, you know, like usually here first you're like, oh, I want to create a brand, I want to do this stuff, you know, it doesn't work like that. You go to what do we have, what's available, what are the capabilities, okay, great, this is what they can make, what can we do with it that's different, how can we spin it, how can we make it cool, and whatever else we want to make it, and then, you know, kind of produce it. So it works the other way around. So also, like, we look at other different African countries, and we look at what are artisans doing in other countries, you know, what are the capabilities? Oh, that's amazing, they do this. Okay, what can we do with that? You know, does it make sense to us? And then you sort of work backwards with them.
Speaking about that, so you started in Ethiopia, and you've since expanded working with beaters and crocheters in Kenya and Madagascar. Can you talk about, and knitters, can you talk a little bit about how you found these artisans and incorporated them into lemlem?
I mean, I think ideally, you know, Africa is so vast, and every country is really different, and every country brings their own thing. You know, they have their own skills, their own natural resources, their own way of doing things, and so there's so much richness there. And you know, I wish, and it's hard because it's quite challenging, because there is no place you can actually just go and tap in and be like, oh, that's amazing, Ghana does this, or oh, Rwanda does this, there's no place. So it's really hard. You have to have somebody on the ground who's like going, looking, testing, because it's really hard when you have, you know, a small group of artisans and you want to work with them. It's great, but then once you make something and then you say, okay, now we're going to produce, and I want it by this time, and I want this much quantity, and then everything sort of sometimes falls apart because it's not easy, because they're not really organized yet. And so it's a long-term process, and you have to create a long-term relationship with the people that you work with. And we also don't want to go in and do a one-time thing and then say, okay, thanks, that was great, and now we're leaving.
Yeah.
Because then you're not really helping them. If anything, I don't know if it's worse, you know. So it's tricky. So you have to really do a lot of due diligence and really work collaboratively with them to try and find a way to stay connected and do more things with them and get them comfortable and you comfortable with what they can do and stuff like that. So it's a process. It's definitely a process.
What's amazing about that is that you are putting in so much of the work and creating an industry in all these places that other people can come and start working with artisans as well. So, I mean, you're laying so much groundwork to build something so much bigger than even lemlem.
Yes, I mean, for sure there was one of my, you know, wishes when I started lemlem was, apart from just, you know, preserving the art of weaving and employing artisans, it's really also about, you know, kind of setting a trend and setting a model and facilitating it so that other people can come in, because we do want an industry to get created. We do want more people to be employed, because that's how you're going to reverse and really make a change. And so, I mean, that is one of the, because, you know, we've all sort of, actually, to be honest, like, I was very much inspired by Bono. And his Red campaign, and when they started doing that, they were really the first ones to start thinking of Africa as a place to make things, you know, at the time, and sort of wanting to change also this image of Africa and what is known as what is Africa and the image that it represents, and trying to change that into actually a place where all these beautiful things are made, and it's great, and changing the view of people. So I was very much, I think when I was going back to Ethiopia and looking at all the artisans, the Bono thing was very much present in my mind, and so I think it probably inspired me to go that way.
Have you had any feedback from your artisans about kind of creating these more contemporary fashions, and what do they think about it? Do they think it's cool? Do they think it's too different from what they make traditionally?
I mean, we have a lot of funny stories about that. You know, it's tricky, because when you go into something like this, you know, there are things that they're really comfortable making and that they're used to making, and there's ways that they look at something and they're used to looking at it a certain way. And so when you come in with all your New York attitude and I want them to be like this, and I want this to be 1 centimeter, not 1.5, because that doesn't work, and things like this, it's quite a challenge, because they're like, if it's one or two, what's the big difference? And you're like, but it is a huge, you know, so all these kind of things you have to kind of work out at them. And so at the beginning, there was resistance to like, oh, they're in New York, they don't understand how it works, da, da, da. And you have to learn. On our side, we had to do a lot of learning as well, and knowing how to work with them and showing them. But then what was interesting, what started happening was, suddenly we had weavers who were like so in awe of the garments they were producing. They loved it, and they were so excited by what they were making, you know? And so now we had because we work with a workshop that's run by this one woman, Ethiopian woman. And so we're not the only ones they work for, you know. But then we had some weavers who were basically saying, okay, we just want to do lemlem stuff now. That's it. That's all.
This is the best one.
Yeah. And so it's really wonderful. But it's funny. And when I remember the first few times when I went back to visit and I walked through the workshop, I had some of the weavers be like, oh, you guys are the New York people. And I'm like, I'm coming in peace. You know, so, yeah.
One of the things I really love about some of the collaborations you've done with, you know, other fashion brands like Montclair, like Sonia Rykiel, is that you're like this bridge that's looking at these beautiful traditional things that you have a personal connection to, and then amplifying them into this kind of international fashion world that, you know, we see in the magazines. Talk to me a little bit about those collaborations.
I know, those are really always so fun to do. I mean, the Montclair and Pier Paolo one was kind of insane and beautiful and otherworldly, but also was the Sonia Rykiel, and we did one with Pierre Hardy as well. I mean, it really usually comes from, you know, some of the relationships that I have with all these, you know, these people and talking about what we're doing. And really everyone, and I feel like we get so much support also from the fashion industry for doing something that is, you know, sustainable and that, you know, sort of is a feel-good brand. So everybody's really happy to help and wants to support us. So, and I think it's also really exciting for, you know, these designers to do something that they don't normally do. And then they have to work also with the limitations of the fabrics. And then how do they look at it? So they all look at it differently, and that's kind of exciting to work with them. And when we did the Pier Paolo, he totally just, you know, he literally just lifted off the, you know, the designs and put that on these incredible parkas, and it's like it gave something completely different. With Sonia Rykiel, we actually used the fabric, and because they did their sweaters, because that's what they're known for, and we connected it with, so we made like a sweater dress. And so it's all these different ways, and it's exciting because you're basically bridging, you know, cultures and views and opinions, and I mean, it's really, really magical, and in a way, you're erasing the divide and the lines, and so it's really wonderful.
People talk so much about cultural appropriation, but what I love about this is that people are never going to stop being inspired by other people's cultures, and there are definitely amazing ways to do it, and I think, you know, this is a great example. So I think we have time for one more question before we take some questions from the audience. So I just want to ask you about your opinion. How do you see Africa's influence on international fashion expanding in the future? I know that you are helping to lay this amazing foundation. So what do you kind of predict for different countries in Africa as being kind of at the forefront of fashion?
I mean, I think there's a lot going on in Africa right now. Like really, it's kind of really, really interesting time. I was just actually in Lagos for Fashion Week, which was my first time.
Oh, I'm so jealous. I want to go so bad.
And it was really incredible because, you know, it's a fashion week that sort of embraces all African designers to come. I mean, they edited it obviously, but it's open to all African designers. So there was people from Morocco, there was people from South Africa, there's people from Ghana, there's all these incredible designers coming in, showing. So people are getting used to that, which is actually really interesting. I think that it's not so much only African designers coming into the West and impacting the West. I think there's something exciting about also just locally becoming an industry for the local, you know, consumer, which I think is actually even almost cooler.
Absolutely.
And so there is a lot of movement. I think it's really amazing. I think he's Nigerian. One of the Nigerian designers, I think, is up for an LVMH prize and things. So stuff is happening.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think it's the next. I feel like Africa is I don't even want to say the next because I think it is now.
I read an amazing statistic about like a huge proportion of the population is under 30. It's such a young country, or it's such a young continent, and there's so much going on.
There's so much going. Yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting.
Well, it's great that you are kind of at the forefront of that and creating this industry.
Thank you. Thank you.
So if anyone has any questions, thank you so much. So here's one. Where did the name lemlem come from, and what does it mean?
So lemlem is it's an Ethiopian. The Amharic is the language, and it means to bloom. And actually, how it happened was we didn't know what to call the brand, and I felt like I was too close to the brand to come up with a name, and so I asked my team to just send me names that they thought were cool, because that sounded cool, that's easy, and all these kind of things. And so out of the names that I received from actually one of my designers, there was 10 names, and then one of them was lemlem. And it was funny because it stopped me because my daughter, her name is Rai, but her grandmother had refused to call her Rai and always called her lemlem for whatever reason, I don't know. And so when I saw the name on that list, I thought, okay, well, maybe it's, sort of serendipity. Yeah. So we called it lemlem.
So the next question is, what inspired you to pursue modeling? Changing gears a little bit.
Probably what inspires everybody to pursue modeling. I mean, I don't know. Growing up in Ethiopia was the idea of modeling was very exciting. The glamour, I mean, I don't think I really knew what I wanted to do when I was younger, but we had fashion shows that we were, like I was explaining earlier, that were happening, and also in our school, in high school, we had, for graduation, we used to organize these small fashion shows, and being part of that fashion show was like basically the ultimate thing to do in high school.
Yeah.
So we all wanted to be part of that, and I think that's kind of how we started, like this buzz of being, it made you like the cool girl or whatever. And then I saw what was happening in Europe, and I used to watch like all these amazing old footage of catwalks, with the girls and in Italy and all these things walking, and it was so, I don't know, it was so glamorous and exciting. And so I was really, really skinny. Also growing up very tall and very skinny, and so I don't know, I thought maybe I could try.
Did it ever cross your mind that you might go into design before you kind of came up with the idea of lemlem?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No.
What do you think the future of sustainable fashion looks like?
I don't know. That's a really hard question. I definitely think we are going into sustainable fashion for sure. It might take longer than we think, but I think eventually everybody's going to go to that, I think. But I mean, sustainable is such a difficult word because it really implies so many different things, For us, how I look at sustainability is working with artisans and making sure that their lives are their incomes are sustainable and they have consistency, and we're changing their lives around, It's not, for us, it's not about technology or materials or things like that. So there's all these there's so many different ways, recycling out, we're trying also for us, like we want to use our scraps and, make them into something else. And so we're trying to have zero waste and all these. So I think everyone is really making an effort to do sustainable things. At the same time, I think trying to be sustainable is also a very, very expensive endeavor. And I don't know if people really realize how expensive it actually is, unfortunately. And so I think there might be a lot of resistance because of that. I think the bigger brands will have a better chance at probably paving the way, because it really costs a lot of money to really be sustainable from top to, to bottom.
kind of piggybacking on that, would you mind talking a little bit about the foundation that's also a part of Lemlem?
Yeah, yeah. So, like, I was working on maternal health before as a philanthropic effort, and okay, more questions.
We're not going to get time to get through all of them, but hopefully a few more.
One of the things when I was growing up in Ethiopia that struck me was that a lot of women were dying in childbirth, and it was a very normal thing to happen in Ethiopia. And so when I was pregnant with my son, I was lucky enough to be here, and I had my children here. And so I saw the difference of delivering in a place like this and delivering in a place like Ethiopia, where you're basically wondering whether you're going to live or not, make it through the delivery process, because at the time we all assumed that women were dying because you could not prevent their death, because it was something so extraordinary of a problem that was happening to them. But actually I realized now, well, when I was here, that more than 90% of the women who were dying of things that were easily preventable or treatable, but didn't have access to skilled health attendants or clinics or, all these simple things, because all the things that they're dying from are like very basic. It's like either infection or hemorrhage or having, the baby's too big and they can't get a C-section. It's very simple things. And so I decided to work with the WHO and help raise awareness of this issue, because it wasn't being talked about. And through that, I started my foundation also to work more on that and to expand on that and to do more small programs to sort of show how to make a difference. And so we've been continuing to do that, and now we work with a wonderful organization called AMREF as well for the last 4 or 5 years. Who actually focus a lot on training midwives across Africa and third world countries to be able to, so you can have a healthy pregnancy and childbirth. And then when we hit 10-year mark of Lemlem, we decided to sort of merge the foundation and the brand together, because we also decided that it would be interesting to, as a foundation, work around our artisan communities as well. And also introduce our customers to our artisan community and what that means. And so we started working on training programs actually for more weavers. Traditionally, weaving is a man's sort of job, and it goes from father to son is how the skill is transferred. And so we're like trying to encourage more women to come into the workplace that way. So we're doing training programs for women to train how to weave, and then giving them jobs immediately after, and sort of trying to change things around like that. We're also working in Kenya with a wonderful workshop as well, where we're training sewing, and because really it's about helping get skill and then helping them get jobs, and then I feel like that's how you change their lives completely.
Absolutely, just not just the person, their families as well.
Yeah. So.
What is one piece of advice you would give your younger self that would have prepared you better for today's world? Or perhaps maybe a piece of advice you'd give your children. You want to look at it either way.
It's so different, though.
Well, let's start with your younger self then.
I always hate those questions because they're so difficult. I guess maybe that even if you don't know how, or which way to go, I think you eventually figure it out and it's okay. I think it would be something like this.
I think that's good. I think, yeah. I work with students a lot, and I feel like everything is so life or death, and I was like, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So I think we have time for one more question. So I think this one, looking toward the future, what are your goals for Lemlem?
Big goals. Well, it's definitely expansion. It's definitely growth. We are actually very excited because we're launching swimwear.
Oh, wow.
Yes, so that's very exciting. All the team is very, very excited. It's really about trying to create more and more the world of lemlem, I guess, is basically the goal.
To create like a lifestyle brand.
Yes,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you.
Made in Africa, obviously.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you guys would like to see the lemlem piece that we have on exhibition right now, it's across the street in Fabric in Fashion. The show has been extended until May 11th, and we're open. The galleries are open until 8 o'clock tonight. So please come and see lemlem, and please.
I don't know why it's not here. That dress. I don't understand.
Blame our conservators. Please help me in thanking Liya for coming this week.